Welcome to The Road. This is a weekly podcast of All Saints Lutheran Church. I'm your host, John Pedersen, and I serve as pastor. Each week, we reflect on faith, life, and navigating the road ahead. The language of journey is common when we think about life. It has its joys and challenges along the way, and we all need a little encouragement and guidance at times to keep us going. There's a word in the Bible, asphalia, which means truth, but it's the same root word we use in English for asphalt, if you can believe that. It's a solid surface that makes travel easier and more assured. And so every week we're going to be exploring elements of faith and life that keep us on the road. Faith isn't about living a perfect life. It's about finding our way, getting through rough spots, but seeking out those great vistas too. You can find my weekly message here, but you'll also find special conversations with guests who have insights on things like wellness, parenting, and living with unique purpose. If you appreciate this podcast, remember to subscribe where possible and share it with a friend. Here's this week's message. Well, we made an annual pilgrimage this past Saturday, our family. We got up early and we drove to Lake Street in Minneapolis to visit Inga Bretzens. Inga Bretzens has a meat market and gift shop that has been in the same location for over 100 years. They do sell lutefisk, which we want nothing to do with. We do love their Swedish sausage, lefse, cream dill herring, and cheeses, among other things. I went there growing up, and it's become a tradition for our family, and we like going when everyone else in the world does around Christmas time. And so we arrived just after 9 a.m. on Saturday when they opened. We waited outside in line for an hour to get into the meat market. It was hovering around 5 degrees. Somebody who arrived after us eyed the line kind of warily and asked if this was the line for the new iPhone. Wrong line. Left says better. So there's no waiting for the gift shop, so we did take turns going inside to warm up a little bit. And we got our food finally, cash only as always. The Swedish sausage is for dinner tonight. But everyone there was like us, looking to reconnect with generations of family traditions and heritage. They were willing to travel from all over to come. Someone in line said they were visiting from Seattle and just had to be there. Your traditions and priorities may not include standing outside in an hour-long line in 5-degree weather in the week before Christmas. Your traditions may be more sensible. But however you celebrate and wherever your own story and heritage takes you, it probably leads you to travel on occasion and return to your roots, whether physically or in spirit. Many over the years have noted that the preparations we make for Christmas amount to a lot of busy work, whether it's decorating, cleaning, cooking, baking, or shopping. Some will ask perhaps with a bit of skepticism whether any of it really has anything to do with the heart of Christmas. And I kind of see the point. And perhaps some of our traditions do at times distract from kind of the heart of it all. And yet our preparation and travel and whatever stress that we feel reflects something of the value and priority of this moment and this story for us more broadly. In fact, intentional or not, it faintly mimics the harried days that Mary and Joseph experienced prior to that first Christmas. We know the story, and to remind ourselves it was a difficult time. Living under Roman rule was harsh. Rome exploited local populations. The main purpose of the census was to impose imperial taxation, which we know later from the Gospels was often made worse by corrupt tax collectors who would take a cut for themselves on top of everything else. For the people of Judea who were seeking to be true to their own traditions and beliefs, Rome brought its own idols and otherwise corrupted the practices of the temple. And as always, they used violence to impose obedience. It was pretty demoralizing. And although a world and 2 millennia apart, every one of us can relate to a situation that seems unbearable in some way. Life can become uncertain and heavy when events or powers beyond our control intrude, or we struggle with things like health, relationships, or finances. It's moments like that when we can feel vulnerable. Making a long trip on foot or donkey in the final days leading up to the birth of Jesus must have left Mary and Joseph feeling anxious and on edge. When they finally made it to Bethlehem, they ended up in a less than ideal situation. No room in the inn. Despite our modern assumptions, the term for inn that has been a classic part of the story didn't refer to some ancient hotel. This was a term for a family's bonus room or guest room, as the gospel I read earlier has it. Because of the pilgrimage of people back to Bethlehem for the census, that room in the home of Joseph's relatives was already filled. What was available was essentially their basement, which would have been a cave. It's where families would keep their animals. And that was where Mary and Joseph stayed. That's what leads to the images depicting Christmas that so many of us are familiar with Jesus laying in the manger, which was a feed trough surrounded by sheep. The circumstances of Christmas mean that it was filled with discomfort, uncertainty, and all the aromas that you might imagine. And yet, rightly so, the picture we have in mind is beautiful and filled with warmth and hope. It's a messy kind of joy. Despite all of our best plans and attempts to manage our lives, the joy and beauty we so often seek comes in unplanned and unsettling situations very often. This is where God shows up with grace and forgiveness and peace in the most unlikely places. In fact, God first sends an angel to the shepherds who sometimes had questionable reputations. Shepherding was not exactly a profession most aspired to. But on that night, it's as if a portal opens to heaven in the fields surrounding Bethlehem. In the Old Testament, the idea of God showing up isn't always a good one. Sometimes the thought of God coming was accompanied by an expectation of judgment or anger. But to foreshadow who Jesus would be, the very first words the angel speaks are, "Do not be afraid." They are words of peace. In their time and our time, there has always been reason to be afraid. If you have worries, then hear the words of the angel for you tonight. Do not be afraid. Those may seem like well-meaning but hollow words for some who are confronting really difficult problems and concerns. But from the birth of Jesus and throughout his life, God's promise of hope and joy is not necessarily the kind that simply wipes out the struggles and realities we face. That idea can lead to some harsh consequences. That's not what God is doing here. Instead, the hope and joy on this night comes right into the messy realities that we face, to bring light into darkness and hope in the midst of despair. God does not ignore or retreat from our pain and suffering. God goes into it to bring hope and healing. As the Gospel of John says, the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. The angel comes to lowly shepherds in a field, and Jesus comes into a basement cave in a land of deep darkness, as Isaiah foretold, among a people that are struggling. This is a hope that's not afraid to move directly into places that are muddy. God does not seek to eliminate undesirable parts of the world, but to redeem them. This is what grace is. It's true grace when someone who cares shows up at a time when everything seems to be in question in your life. It's grace when you're struggling, and rather than avoid you, someone sits with you and is willing to open themselves up to share in your vulnerability and pain. The angel announces to the shepherds, "I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. To you is born this day in the city of David a Savior." And the shepherds are told where to find him, and they go with haste to see and tell the story to Mary and Joseph and those gathered. Luke says they made known what had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed at what the shepherds told them. And Mary treasured all these words and pondered them in her heart. That image of Mary is one of the parts of the story that always resonates with me. Mary offers a pause, a moment to hold everything together. What does all of this mean? What is certain, what is not, and what will come of all of this? Mary's moment of treasuring and pondering it all is what we do alongside her every time we return to this story. And we return to it because the promise of existential hope comes amid our own hopes and uncertainty. This resilient hope comes in the darkest and most barren time of the year. It's announced to ordinary shepherds. Jesus is born outside of the king's palace and the halls of power. And the beginning of peace is already seen in the way the child brings unlikely people together. Shepherds, forgotten descendants of David, magi from the east, along with the angels and animals. Jesus comes for everyone and offers good news, not just a few, not just those deemed worthy or special. This hope is a gift that comes from outside of us to recenter our imagination, to point us toward a new beginning, and to help us renew our relationship with God and one another. Author Herman Hesse wrote, "There is a magic in every beginning." And I bet all of us have had some almost mystical kind of experience along the way. Holding a child, the start of a new relationship, setting out on an exciting trip or journey. And when we stand in that moment, when we're experiencing that, when we hold a child, it pushes us into a moment in which we cannot help but reflect on our own lives, the meaning of our lives, and our responsibility even for future generations. The same might be said for anyone we love that we hold close to us. Mary no doubt experiences that as she treasures it all and ponders it in her heart. And maybe that's why we love Christmas and why we stand in lines and make preparations. It holds this transcendent moment of simple beauty and joy that we desperately want to participate in. The hopes and realities of the world are held together within the peace and redemptive love of God. So much is contained in this moment, in this story. Life is revealed and our own lives revealed along with it. And so on this night and beyond, can we hold the beauty of this moment even as we face uncertainties and worries? Can we live in this moment without a need to know the answers to tomorrow's questions and find the beauty and the joy in what is now? The mystery and beauty of Christmas is the image and experience of God with us. Heaven has broken through into our world. Our separation from God is no more. God comes into our midst and makes things right, restores life and wholeness wherever we are. Peace comes upon the earth and into our own hearts at last. May the peace and the light of Christmas remain with you tonight and always. Amen. That's this week's message. You don't have to navigate the road ahead alone. You can join with others at All Saints. Visit allsaintsmtka.org for more information. Have a great week.